Even the top guilds in the world are reporting that the raid bosses are definitely much more challenging than the player base is used to. So Odua is finally on the PTR. Finally, a real Wrath of Lich King Classic raid is on the horizon, because let's be honest, apart from Sarthe on 3 Drakes, Phase 1 has been incredibly dull when it comes to the raiding experience. First of all, it's a rehash of a raid we've already played in Classic. Originally in Wrath of Lich King, this wasn't so much of a problem because barely anyone actually did the original Naxxramas, but this isn't the same story in Classic WoW. The mechanics are so simple in Phase 1, you don't even have to do them, okay? Especially if your damage is high enough. For instance, on Hygen the Unclean, you don't have to do the dance mechanic, you can just get your melee to soak the damage and continue pumping. So yeah, you can actually ignore mechanics. For me personally, when raiding Naxxramas, it really does feel like I'm just standing there and pumping DPS, apart from the rare occasion where I get hit by a mechanic like the debuff on Grobulus and I actually have to move away from the boss. This is why it's actually quite hard to pass well in Phase 1, because most people can just chill and perfect their DPS and there's much less skill required for each player in the raid fight. But this is all about to change. By the way guys, you want to get ready for Ulduar with the best raiding add-ons and weak auras, just subscribe to the channel, check out my subscriber only video, and we have a huge guide there on everything that you need. But anyway, let's move on. Ulduar will be with us soon. It's very likely to be the 20th of December, but if Blizzard actually care about your holiday time, it will likely be the 3rd of January. I am basing this on the general time frame between previous raid PTRs and their release date. Ulduar is when raiding steps up in difficulty, but most importantly, fun and creativity. Luckily, we're getting Ulduar's pre-nerf state, and it'll be tuned to be slightly more difficult than the original Ulduar back in the day, much like Phase 1 raids have been. Many guilds have actually tested the new raid bosses. Even the top guilds in the world are reporting that the raid bosses are definitely much more challenging than the player base is used to. But that isn't going to be a problem, so don't worry, because Odua is designed to be enjoyed by every kind of player. The casual raider, with or without a guild, can enjoy the 10-man version of Odua, because on the PTR, the 10-man version is tuned to be much easier than 25-man mode. The average raider can enjoy Ulduar on 25-man mode, and then the more hardcore raiding guilds can press the difficulty button, sometimes quite literally, and make the content more challenging for them. In my opinion, it ticks all the boxes that every classic WoW player wants out of the raiding side of this game. Hard mode and Ulduar is the early experimental version of heroic mode in World of Warcraft. Rather than there being a separate difficulty you have to set before you enter the raid, you will intentionally do the mechanics differently to make the encounter more difficult and therefore unlock better loot. Or sometimes there are just simple DPS races, like for instance the Hodor encounter. If you kill him under 3 minutes, you have completed the hard mode. This style of raiding obviously just got replaced by heroic mode in the next raid tier, which is a shame because, in my opinion, this was a creative way for raid groups to unlock more loot. I think they should have added heroic mode like they did in Trial of Grand Crusader, but then also added extra hard modes on a boss-to-boss basis with the opportunity to unlock extra loot. Nonetheless, the hard modes are interesting and will provide a significant challenge to players, which should keep Ulduar relevant even into the next raid tier, especially as the item level of Ulduar loot has been increased. According to data mining, these are the item level changes, so the minimum will be 10 man is going to be 225, and the maximum will be 252 for hard mode weapons, which is nearly ICC level. And obviously the legendary healing mace will be 258, very likely meaning it will be viable until Wrath of the Lich King ends. This means that we're going to spend a lot of time in this raid. Luckily it's a big raid with many bosses, because the Trial of the Grand Crusader phase is going to feel much like Phase 1 in TBCs, into a very short and sweet raid, and deciding to prune the difficulty modes of Trial of the Grand Crusader, which in my opinion is a bad idea. Because realistically, it's a half-an-hour raid when you have it on farm. Why not have the 4 difficulties available for a half-an-hour raid? In In my opinion, I think they should release Trial of a Grand Crusader with Onyxia and a version of Ruby Sanctum scaled to that raid tier rather than that coming out after ICC when nobody really cares about raiding anymore. And then throwing a time walking event for Blackwing Lair with a Season of Mastery changes. That could be interesting, but obviously that is very wishful thinking. At a bare minimum, I do think that Phase 3 should have Onyxia and Ruby Sanctum released with it. Now, the last encounter of Ulduar Yogg Saron is probably the most interesting to talk about here. It's not necessarily the most fun encounter, but it's definitely going to be the most challenging and talked about. You see, there's actually 5 different difficulty modes for this fight. Throughout Ulduar, you will defeat the Watcher bosses, who, long story short, are actually good guys who've been turned into bad guys by strange tentacle business we're not going to go into. And when you defeat them, they will offer their assistance defeating Yogg Saron. Freya provides the Resilience of Nature buff, increasing your damage by 10% and healing from all sources by 20%. She also drops Sanity Wells that regenerate your sanity while stood inside them. You see, the longer this fight goes on, the more your sanity drops. You start off at 100%, and then it slowly drops down, and certain mechanics will drop it by quite a chunk. And then when it reaches 0, that's it, game over. You are permanently under the control of Yogg Saron, and you will have to be killed by the rest of your raid team. This is the hardest Watcher to go without because it means you have to perfect the mechanics, otherwise you lose too much sanity throughout the encounter. Thorin provides the Fortitude of Frost, which increases all damage by 10% and reduces damage taken by 20% from all sources. He also has a Protective Gaze ability, which is essentially a cheat death mechanic on a cooldown. Mimiron provides the Speed of Invention, again a 10% damage buff and 20% extra movement speed. He also will cast the Destabilization Matrix ability that reduces the attack speed by 100% and casting speed 300% of any Saronite based creatures for 30 seconds, so he just helps reduce damage on the raid. Lastly, we have Thorin. He gives Fury of a Storm, again it's another 10% damage boost and a 20% health boost, and then he also casts a Titanic Storm, which basically means he sometimes just kills adds for you. So overall, these buffs are giving you 40% extra damage, 20% damage reduction, 20% increased healing, and 20% extra health and movement speed. And with all this, it still is a difficult encounter. Now imagine doing this without any of the buffs. Like I said, the main challenge is doing this without Freya. You start the encounter with 100% sanity, and certain mechanics, like for instance Brain Link, that links 2 targets together, they will lose 2% of their sanity every 1 second unless they're within 20 yards of each other. You can lose a lot of sanity to mechanics like this if you just don't respond to them fast enough. There's also Malady of the Mind, which drops your sanity by 3% and attempts to jump to multiple targets. This means the fight is normally complete chaos. I'm not going to lie, every time I've done this fight on private servers, it's been absolute mania. You have to kill multiple adds while trying not to turn your fellow raiders insane by stacking near them and accidentally spreading damage mechanics to them. There's a lot of personal responsibility here, and one person slacking is enough to drop the sanity of the rest of the group both in-game and out of game. But nonetheless, it's a very fun fight, very similar to Cthulhu in AQ40, which makes sense to be honest, since both are old gods. And obviously the great thing about making this encounter harder is that every time you do, you get extra and more powerful loot. You get rewarded for being a better player and a better raid team. I imagine a lot of raid leaders are going to feel an extreme sensation of satisfaction when they do eventually get their raid team to defeat Yogg with 0 Watchers. Either that or they're totally going to lose their minds. And if you can't wait for Odua to release, you can give it a spin right now on the PTR. All you have to do is sign up to the PTR on WoW's website, and then you can download the PTR client. You can copy your current character that you play on live servers, or make a template character, which is a very good opportunity I'd always recommend for people to take advantage of, because you can try out new classes in a realistic and raiding environment to make a better decision on what ult you're going to play. Just remember that not all raiding consumes and enchants are provided by the PTR vendors, usually anyway, so be sure to get everything that you want on your live character before you copy it over. You can actually copy the same character as much as you want, well obviously there'd be a limit to 50 times that you can have on one server, if you need, more items and gold. You just have to rename the character every time that you copy it. By the way guys, you're thinking of doing a replay of Oblivion on my second channel, I have a little cheeky mod list that attempts to perfect the game by eradicating all of the game's flaws. My second channel is called MetaGoblin if you want to check it out. It's always in the description of all my videos. But anyway, until my next video, ciao.